Thank you, Will, and thank you everyone for sticking with us so far. The afternoon programming has been great, although for me it sort of brings home just how slow the progress has been so far, which can be frustrating. I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes I struggle with what our last speaker spoke about, looking at that glass half full scenario. But one thing that always energizes me and has been energizing me throughout this COP is conversations with young people. And today I have three of them who are doing amazing work and would love to share that with you. So I'm going to call on stage Marinel Ubaldo, Nicole Becker, and Anita Soina. Thank you guys so much for sharing, for joining me here on the Devex stage. And like I say, your work and speaking to you guys always seems to energize me. But one thing I've found is that the climate message and climate activism really resonates so much with the young people. And I'm wondering, why is that so? Why are you guys so energetic? Where do you get it from? I'll start with you, Marielle.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, as for me, climate activism has become so personal to me because of a personal experience when Super Typhoon Haiyan ravaged our province in the Philippines in 2013. It killed thousands of people. It destroyed a lot of homes. We went back to zero. So that kind of experience, I don't want to go back to that experience, and I also don't want my children to suffer the way we suffered. So climate activism, climate advocacy, climate justice advocacy has become so personal to me because that is also fighting for a just world, for a healthy world for my children to see. I don't want them to just be busy surviving another typhoon. I don't want them to experience how we lost so many people, how we lost our loved ones, how we lost our family, how we lost our livelihood, our house. I want them to grow up in a world where it is safe for them to dream, it is safe for them to live, it is safe for them to hone their full potential, because this world is not ours to really to consume, but for the next generation to enjoy. So I guess that is, I always go back to that why I am here, why I am fighting for climate justice. It's because I want the next generation, my children and the children of my children, to live in a world that is just and fair and that is for them to see.
And I'm hearing a lot of that at COP27. It's like everyone that I speak to, who's like around your age, who's at the youth and children's pavilion, are always talking about this is personal for me because, like, in a few years' time, this is going to affect my children, it's going to affect my children's children. I'm going to love someone who's here in 2100. I want to leave something for them. Is that what motivates you, Nicole?
Well, actually, I think our energy, or at least my energy, I would say, comes also from being afraid, but not only about the future, because of course the consequences of the climate crisis will be get better if the world leaders now don't take the necessary action, but also we are already experiencing the consequences of the climate crisis, so we are actually afraid of what is happening now, and I think the action that we have and all the time that we put in climate activism in part is because we are afraid of that future, and for me is how I don't just be in my bed crying, but I do things. I do things because I really think that we don't have a lot of time, but we have time, and since we have time, we have a lot of things to do and to push for the people who today are making this decision, take the necessary action to stop it and also to adapt to the climate crisis in our countries that they don't have the resources to address the climate crisis and to also adapt to the consequences of the climate crisis that we have today.
Okay. And Anita, what's motivating you? Is it fear?
Thank you very much. I think my colleagues have touched on almost everything. It's the fact that we are directly affected. You cannot afford to, it becomes hard for us to afford to keep quiet or maybe to take a step back when clearly we are the ones who are affected. And it's not only about our future. I come from the Maasai community in Kenya, which has been hit hard by droughts. So I am looking at the situation in my own community. I am also one believer of everybody is doing an amazing job where they are, and if they stop doing, nobody will do it. Why I say so is because I know there are so many people who could be doing what we think is the same, but your voice is equally important where you are as the other person. So if I stop doing it today, I believe nobody else will do what I am doing in my space. And that's why we do not only take it to activism. We are not only holding placards, but we are participating in real action on ground. I run an initiative that we participate in forestation. We plant fruit trees for school children and families, even in their homes. When we go to the coastal region, we take part in activities such as advocacy, sustainable catching of octopus. We have plastic, ending plastic pollution and all that. So we as young people have actually moved from just asking and asking and asking, but actually contributing to real action on the ground.
I love that, real action on the ground. And when you talk about asking and asking and asking and asking, one of the frustrations that sometimes comes up is, I'm doing all this work, I'm putting myself out there, but are people listening to me? This year was the first year where we had a children's and youth pavilion at COP27. Is that a sign of progress? What do you think, Nicole? Are we moving forward? Are people actually listening?
I think having a youth pavilion is so important because, for example, the last COP or that I had the opportunity to go to Glasgow, we didn't have a space to have meetings, to be like a point where we can meet. So I think it's really, really important. I don't think that having a pavilion makes our voice heard at all. It's something basic that we need to have because we are a very important sector at COP. But I don't think it's make automatically that okay, our voices now are being here. But at least, of course, it's a progress, and it means that that young people are being more taken in account at this type of events.
Okay. And speaking of the pavilion itself, I think it was yesterday when the COP president visited your pavilion and he sent out a statement. He said to you guys, I need your voices. You guys need to speak up because this is about you. Do you think that when you speak up, he's actually listening, Marinel?
That is very interesting because the youth has been speaking up. The youth has been in the front line already, even before us. We are just continuing the work of the other youth who are now adults. There are a lot of actions already before. And I just wish that speaking up and actually being a youth speaking up is not just being taken as tokens. You know, I feel like a lot of our leaders are pushing us, are not telling us to speak up, be the voice, and blah blah blah. But when we actually speak up, are our demands actually being into consideration when they decide what's best for us? Because we have already written our global youth demands, our global youth statement. We drafted our youth manifesto in Italy last year, and then in COP26 it was just recognized. But how are we making sure that those demands are actually being addressed in implementation of COP outcome? So it is not enough that we are just speaking up. We need leaders who will actually consider and take into consideration all the demands that youth are saying. Because yes, we can speak up as much as we can, but if our leaders are not listening, what's the point? We will just be there in the streets shouting for climate justice. But if these leaders will just keep putting walls against the youth, then there will be no change that would happen.
That's a real concern that I keep hearing among so many people when we speak about tokenism. And Anita, maybe you can take us through one, what are the demands of the youth and how do we move beyond tokenism to actually have you guys considered as stakeholders?
Thank you. So you've actually reminded me that I was speaking today at UNOPS, and one of the things that I highlighted is how we are going to involve the young people also in the money making part of conservation. Because when we are looking for volunteers, it's always where are the youths. I know of these youths who can volunteer and all this, but when it comes to the bit where people are now enjoying the fruits of green jobs, and all that, it's not about the youths anymore. So that alone is something that discourages many people from the space. I can tell you from my own experience, ever since I joined the space, I haven't studied anything related to this, but I joined the space because I'm so passionate about contributing to solving global community problems. And trying to convince other people and bringing more young people to the space is not easy, because if they are not passionate about it, sometimes it can be boring. The language itself is very heavy. So we have to look at how can we bring them on board. And now this is why I mentioned the money making part of it. Most people want to know what's in for me here. We've had cases in my country where young people have started tree nurseries, because we are supposed to be to have a certain tree cover as a country, and we are told that the trees that we have in our nurseries are not enough. So we have young people who go out of their way to have the tree nurseries, but you realize that when we have mega tree planting sessions, it's always the government to procure that. Why don't you give opportunities to these people who also own tree nurseries? Why don't you buy from them so that they can continue to stay in the space? So I feel like, and we also need to look beyond thinking activists are enemies to the government. I mean, I
That's
am
a
an
very good point to make in Egypt. Please continue.
yes. I, I ran for office and I am an activist. So I don't think I am an enemy to myself and to my passion for politics and leadership. So we need to rethink that, because we activists can also sit down with governments. Activists can say, well done to governments that are doing well. It's not always about fighting and all that. Actually, people are activists because there's something wrong in the society. And sometimes I tell people I do not enjoy. It's not like I love being an activist, but it's circumstances that are pushing you to be one. So I think there's need to understand that youths are problem solvers. They are innovators. They are educators. They're doing all they can help to implement the policies that we are actually drafting in these conferences. So there's a very huge gap in involvement of the youth, especially on ground. And maybe to finally mention on the climate finance and the climate funding bit, is that if we are coming to such conferences, and when you hear people asking for financing loss and damage, you realize that everybody is doing it. We are doing it collectively, regardless of whether you're a youth, whether you're a grassroots leader. And when it comes down to our countries, then it also needs to be fair that at least all initiatives are represented. We need to think about special groups like people living with disability and all other groups. So I feel and when we speak as youth, we are not only speaking for ourselves. I am here speaking for youths, but the issues affecting youths are also affecting women in my community, affecting girls, affecting men, affecting people living with disabilities. I mean, these are community problems. So we are speaking out as youths, but speaking for a huge population. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you spoke about activism and how sometimes you can feel like you're being repressed, you're being restricted. And I just wanted you to touch on that a little bit, Nicole, because for me, this COP has felt a little bit quieter than usual, to say the least. How do you operate in such a space?
That's interesting. Yeah, it's the first COP that we are not going to have a huge strike outside. And we believe as young activists that the hope is not inside COP, but outside, right? Because we think that the power is in the people. And for example, at that COP, and this COP, we are not going to do the strike that is part of our identity in a way. But I mean, we also had the opportunity to do a lot of actions and also being in panels, being here today talking. I mean, we find different ways because it's not about the way, but about the message. So of course, it's a weird cop at that way, and we have a lot of things related with the human rights or things about machismo in general. I know if this is the word in English, but yeah, we find a way to say our message anyways.
That's really inspiring. And also, one thing I wanted to touch on is that there may be young people who are at home who are interested in activism. You spoke that some people spoke about people feeling discouraged, but there are also people who just don't know how to get started. So I just wanted to ask each one of you, what advice do you have to someone who wants to get started in activism? And maybe you can share a little bit of how you actually got started.
You don't need any label to be a climate activist. You can just start on your own. First, vote. Vote for the right leaders. Vote for those people who would actually advance your cause and who would represent you better. We need leaders to really represent us, the issues that we face, the issues that are in the communities, the issues that we actually, the issues that are affecting us actually in our everyday life. And when you do not vote, you're actually just you are missing that opportunity in you to actually be part of the solution. So that is one. And I think I started being climate activist when in 2012 when I was trained to be a child facilitator. I thought that climate change is a very interesting topic and we could learn more about it. It didn't really occur to me that a year after Super Typhoon Haiyan would happen, and it kind of like showed me how climate change would destroy a lot of lives if we will not act now. And we could have acted already before. Our leaders could have acted already proactively. But unfortunately, our actions are not enough even. So at the end of the century, we're still our temperature would still rise. And whatever we do now, it is for the next generation to enjoy. So, and that is really worth it of all the actions, of all the efforts that we could do. And and being a climate activist, it doesn't have to be grand already. You can start in your own family. You can start by changing your lifestyle. You can start by sending petition to your local government unit. You can start by joining a lot of organizations. You can start by volunteering even. You don't need that label because we are all climate activists, because we are all connected. We need everybody to be on board, so every one of us are climate activists, just fighting and pushing for a greater world.
So do what you can in your own space. Anita, what advice do you have?
Exactly what you said. I mean, there's a quote that says we don't need one person doing a million things, but we need a million people doing the little that they can, and that way then we are able to impact more change. So for me, I'd say you pick what you think you're best in. Just don't ever feel like you're not doing enough, because we are all different. There I know of people who cannot even stand maybe say, what do we want, climate justice, but if you go back to the grassroots, they're implementing amazing projects. And these are people whose stories have not been told because they don't have the privilege to be or to be in the social space, or maybe they don't even have access to smartphones and all that, but they're really doing amazing work at home. It doesn't have to be activism. It can be something else that is contributing to climate action. um, I think she also talked about voting in the right leaders. And bad leaders are elected by good citizens who do not vote. I ran for office in the last election, and the culture of politics in my country, and I think in Africa, is very toxic. I am from a meeting with parliamentarians, and they were having a discussion on why people in Africa do not win on green platforms, and I actually related to everything. But to me, I'm looking, okay, I didn't win. How am I going to look for the person who won and make sure that person becomes environmentally conscious? Because most of the times we address our challenges and issues to world leaders. Dear world leaders, dear government, dear so and so. How about if you are passionate about politics and leadership, become the leader yourself, so we don't have to see our children saying dear world leaders, dear government, and all that. So I feel because if you look at where the gap is, that is exactly where the gap is, in the leadership space. Honestly, so many people are doing amazing work. So many, with little and or no resources, people are really putting in so much effort to actually contribute to climate action. And the only place where we have a gap is with the policy makers. So if we can also try and be in those spaces and continue with climate education, it's very important, so that we are raising a generation of environmentally conscious people. It becomes easier when more people are for the planet.
Yeah, which is why I was asking you guys about where you get this energy from. You ran for office. You guys have got so many things that you're doing. Ran for office, you're an author, you're a counselor as well, you're a UNICEF advocate. It's like you guys are doing so many things and filling up all these spaces. Nicole, what's your advice to young people out there?
I would say my advice is just do it. I started in 2019 when I saw a video on Instagram about Greta and all young people in Europe calling for the first international strike. And I didn't understand why in my country, in Argentina, no one was talking about the climate crisis, or just a few people. For example, I was very involved in social topics and human rights, but I have never at that time talked with my friends about it, or I didn't study at school. So I started to look information, and I realized that when we talk about the climate crisis, we are talking about human rights. And when I made that link in my brain, I started to realize that if all the people understand that connection, and that we can talk about the climate crisis without talking about social justice too, is when we met with some friends and we create Youth for Climate Argentina, that is the local chapter of Friday for Future, and we organized that the first international strike in my country, and 5,000 people came to that strike, and it was amazing. And to be honest, I didn't expect that at all. It was just, okay, let's do it and let's see what happened. And that was the beginning of a movement that now is so bigger comparing with that moment. So I would say that my first advice is just do it. Do it and then see what happened. And also, don't be afraid about what is going to happen, you know?
Yeah, it seems like you never actually know when you're making history, but a few years down the line, it'll be like, this was it. This was the moment that changed everything. And as we're now coming to the end of our time, but I just want to get your final thoughts from you guys. What would be the message that you would want to give to negotiators at COP27, to our leaders at COP27? What final message would you want to give to them? Marielle?
Do not procrastinate on climate action. We do not have time. We are already hearing the tick of the clock. It is now or never. We could have done it a long time before, but we need it now. So do not ever procrastinate. I know we have been procrastinating for so long, and we have reached the point that a lot of countries have already reached the hard limit adaptation. We do not need more countries to reach that level. So we need to help those countries to mitigate and adapt. And please institutionalize funding for loss and damage. We need it now more than ever.
Everyone looking out for that loss and damage facility. And Anita, what would be your final message to them?
Okay, to the leaders who are responsible for pulling up their socks, is that COVID showed us that you can do it if you want to do it. I mean, a day like today, when we didn't have any COVID case, and a day like tomorrow when there was a COVID case, so much was done. Money was given, so much effort, attention to contain COVID-19. I'm trying to imagine in a situation where you cannot self-isolate. I don't think I can be able to quarantine in my community when we have floods. I don't think I can be able to put on a mask when we are actually having mudslides. So this is also a humanity issue. It's more than making it look like a cliche of, we are going for COP27 and taking pictures and doing that. But just thinking about the people back at home who are not in this conference. True story is that most people who are in this conference may have experienced climate change, but not as much as the people back at home. So just look at those people and ask yourself so many questions. And if you really want to contribute to all this distraction, so if they want to do it, they can actually do it. And finally, to just to African leaders specifically, is let us also improve on our priorities. I can imagine a country in a desert that is food secure, and then think about my country that is not food secure. Where did we go wrong? So we need to look at that keenly, and as we ask for the financing, are we also making sure that we are going to use the finances in the right way, so that it's not about show us the money, show us the money, show us the money. We also need to start thinking about how we are going to prioritize when we get the funding, to make
That's
sure
such a
that,
good point. It's
yes.
not only about funding, it's also about what we're going to do with it in the end. And Nicole, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I really agree with your last point. I would say that my main message is there is no climate justice or social justice without climate finance if you are from a country from the global south. We don't have the resources. We are not the most responsible for being in this situation, but we have to deal with the consequences of the climate crisis, and we don't have the resources. And of course, it's very important what you said about also demanding to our governments to use the money to mitigation, to adaptation, but also being here at COP and having the opportunity to talk with world leaders in general, I would say that my main message is about climate finance, definitely, because I live in a country that we have to pay a normal external debt. So it's really difficult to make the actual government or in general the people to understand that the climate crisis is also a priority, because we have 40% of the young people in my country living in poverty, or that at least they don't have access to basic services. So it's really important for them to have the resources to have to can deal with the impact of the climate crisis that we are living now as headway, for example, in the last summer.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you guys for joining me on this panel. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm sure your thoughts are being heard, and we will see action out of them. Thank you.